I guess what I'm interested in as well is because, the school of thought, and we see it quite a bit, is, hiring the person as opposed to just the skill set. I mean, obviously you need the skills. If I'm hiring a sports psychologist and they know nothing about sports psychology, then that's not really going to work. But it's the person as well. And we see a lot of stuff around the importance of values alignment. So have you done much work in the AIS around understanding what are the values of the AIS?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we're very strong. We have some really clear values, integrity and excellence come to the fore. So the AIS has an incredibly good reputation.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it was a forerunner to a lot of what's going on in world sport. In many ways, we were the forerunner to what the UK have done. I mean, the UK have become world leaders. They've surpassed us in many ways if you look at the last, bunch of Olympics. But they used that and then evolved it and iterated it to actually fit within the UK model. There's some really clear values that are in line with the AIS and the way we go about it. It's interesting, one of the things that I've asked, I'm looking at people's attributes and values as a part of my team.
Yeah.
What I'm interested to know what they are, what attributes. One of the questions that they were asked to answer on is, what are your personal attributes?
Yeah.
And it's quite that you would bring to the team.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Some people haven't grasped what that is. They actually haven't grasped what those they don't know what an attribute is. So it's quite interesting that you're looking for self-awareness in people that have actually got a framework to actually bring in and behave accordingly and act accordingly. I guess one of the big things I find is when people sprout values and then live a different life.
Yeah, exactly.
You go into a lot of footy clubs and there's these wonderful signs on the wall, about all these things, and everyone thinks that's the great piece. But then you don't see the behaviours that actually then support those quotes and signs, if that makes sense.
And I think in any organisation, whether it be sporting or business, sort of a friend of mine always says, talk's cheap, money buys the beer. But I guess the analogy is that you can have all these great ideas, but actually driving that behavioural change, that's where the magic is, right?
Yes. That's a daily thing. That's why I think I would go back and talk about a high-performing coach, and I talked about it being dynamic.
Yeah.
It's a daily thing. It needs addressing every day. It's not something that you can just put a quote on a wall and stick it up and make it look pretty, and then that's your framework. It's led from everyone in the organisation, but essentially from your leaders. And some of my more difficult moments in my 30 years have been when I've seen leaders sprout ideology and methods of the way they want to behave and act and lead, and then I've seen them completely act in contradiction to that. And you see the flow-on effect within the groups below. So I think it's really, really important that our leaders and our staff, and it goes down to, it doesn't matter who it is. There are, when you look at some of you read great stories in some organisations about people that have just been running the mailroom.
Yeah.
And the effect of the way that person runs the mailroom and delivers the mail and the implications that has on the whole organisation. So again, you're talking about a piece that it's daily, it's constant, it's dynamic, and it goes from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
It's
definitely.
interesting. I'm sort of starting to come across this new concept of some businesses moving into what they call a culture driver. So they're actually looking at roles where they actually have someone in their organisation whose principal responsibility is to drive, manage, count the culture.
Yeah, definitely.
Really interesting space.
Yeah, and culture, it's a living, breathing sort of organism, really, which is what I think businesses are like living organisms. You've got to feed them, you've got to turn them over, you've got to do all sorts of different things to keep them moving, really. And actually, Ferguson used to say at Manchester United, he'd have a conversation with everyone from, the person, the chefs or the dinner people, as they were being called back then, through to, the people cleaning the boots, and having that sort of, everyone's got whenever they want a trophy, it would be for everyone to enjoy because it's everyone's contributing to the overall success. Yeah,
look, I think you see that a lot with the Formula One too. My son introduced me to that Drive to Survive series on Netflix, and you see some of the behind the scenes stuff, and I saw some of the stuff that Mercedes was doing with the way they treat You know, I think it's very true that ultimately any organisation is successful because of the depth of the people delivering on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Mental versus physical. So in this social media world where I suppose, accessibility that we all have to each other, whether it's, you know, trying to buy a product on Amazon from the other side of the world, or it's just, you know, giving feedback to your favorite player that they were rubbish at the weekend or whatever it might be, you know, and I know obviously social media is really changing the game. I guess really what I'm saying is everything's compressed these days, and we've all got more access to each other. In the same way as in a big company, you can get hold of a CEO just by sending them a message on LinkedIn. So what's your views around mental versus physical and how you sort of manage the social media age?
Yeah, good question. Again, if I use the concept of the continuum, you know, when you start with in my world, in the sports world, when you start working with a young athlete,
yeah,
a lot of the focus is on building their skill set in terms of, and the physical. So there's a physical piece, the skills itself, the physical piece around that, and the mental piece is there. You're starting to introduce them to concepts of the mental piece, right? And the idea is that as you go on the continuum, it's sort of the mental side increases and the other side tends to be more embedded. So it's something that you then ongoing manage. And the mental aspects of being a high performer increase. So I think there's a continuum, and they switch across as you become more elite. The mental aspects are huge.
Yeah,
I think that I say that being a model that it's in my head, but it's really interesting. I think we're now realizing that with things like social media and things that are going on in the world, that we're dealing with different athletes in that development phase. So these 13 to 20-year-old people, and I say people because they're more broadly than we were as 13 or 20-year-old. I think now we're actually realizing that we have to move some of the preparation in the psychology space and the social, you know, space forward. So we've got to start to introduce concepts to them. And look, I'm aware of young athletes now in that 13, 14, 15 bracket who have got very astute parents and coaches that are actually investing in things like psychology support but more as a learning experience. To develop routines and to manage. So I think what was once seen very much mental being the top end piece, it's now going through the whole continuum. But I will say this, I've seen the difference between Olympic medals being won, because most of the time the gaps between an Olympic teams or Olympic sports are very marginal. What separates them in the end is that space between the top of your shoulders and the top of your head.
Yeah, interesting. And when you talk about mental, and, you know, I guess when you get to elite sport, they're all very good. Say we're talking about tennis, you know, anyone in the top few hundreds, a very good tennis player. But you talk about the mindset. So do you have a view around 1% marginal gains? Because I was listening to Tim Glover, who wrote a book, Relentless, who was Coach Jordan and Kobe Bryant and loads of other people. And they were talking about actually to make that significant gain. He was more saying that it's a quantum shift, as opposed to the sort of the Dave Brailsford, Clive Woodward from the rugby. It's the 1% marginal gains, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, look, I think it's a combination. It's interesting. You know, I challenge the 1% thing. Because the 1% thing's predicated on that you've got the other 99% right. The 1% space is only of value if you've got the 99% right. And that's a really interesting thing. The question I ask a lot of people is how many organizations, how many people can actually say they've got the 99% right? When you've got that right, then you start to look at the 1%ers. Someone like a Brailsford with Sky and Ineos, it's quite feasible that they're in the 1% space.
Because they're already...
That dialogue about being in the 1% world is only relevant to organisations that can truly actually go, we've got all these other things in place.
We're on the podium already. How do we get to be the top of the podium?
And often it's about maintaining it. It might be taking the one step. It might be about maintaining and getting sustainable success. I think it's a really interesting piece, because I'll argue that a lot of organisations and a lot of football teams and a lot of sports aren't in the 99% world first. deal with the 1%. They may have individuals within their cohorts that are operating at that level. And certainly in my time, I was in a football clubs where we underperformed on the win-loss ratio, but I had people within that organisation operating in that 1% space.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And there were others that would get themselves to the 99% space, invest in the 1%, and then get this significant growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can tell you that I had a personal experience with an athlete that was world class, like I'm talking world class, seriously elite, but he had one deficiency, and that was in the 1%. He operated in the 99% the whole time, but I couldn't get that 1% leap.
Yeah,
and that 1% leap was the undermining feature of his last campaign.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So I guess really the summary is you've got to take care of the basics before you do you got to bake the cake before you put the icing on it.